Welcome to the new Wizard roguelike Devlog series. I'm bimzydev, and I've been working on this game for the past 2 months with one of my good mates, Alex. If this is your first time here, I'm a professional game developer, and I consistently put out Unity game dev tutorials and content. Today, I'll be showcasing the game we've been developing for the past 2 months and give you an insight on how we're making it. So stick around if you want to learn more about the game dev process. The journey started about 3 months ago, when I got together with some mates and we played our first roguelike game. Since then, I've been hooked, looking for new and old roguelike games to scratch that itch. I've been playing a bunch of games like Risk of Rain, Enter the Gungeon, Gunfire Reborn, Hades, Wizard of Legend, The Binding of Isaac, and that's just getting started. After being locked up in my man cave for about a month grinding out these roguelikes, I decided it was time to get together with Alex and start making one for ourselves. The Global Game Jam 2021 was fast approaching. So we put our ideas onto paper and then got together for 3 days and put out our first roguelike game, I'll Be Lost, which we made in just 72 hours. Quick plug, you can play our game I'll Be Lost on itch.io. You can find the link in the description down below, batteries not included. So after having finished the game jam, we thought the premise of I'll Be Lost was really cool. However, it really didn't feel like a roguelike. But this was a great base for us to start game development of our new game, the Wizard roguelike that we're currently working on. I've just made a new bimzydev community Discord, which you can join if you're interested in hanging out, making some games, playing some games, or if you just have some questions, game dev related, that you want answers to. We're happy to help. See you there. Just like with any new project, we decided to spend the first 2 weeks of our game dev designing and putting together the idea for our game. Going into the design of our game, we knew that we wanted it to be a magic-themed roguelike. We ended up creating a brainstorm for the idea of our game, and which we eventually transitioned into a mood board to sort of get the feeling and art style for the game that we were intending to make. We then finished up with the design by going in a little bit more depth with a lot of the ideas for our game, creating a basic level scale, and then eventually putting all of these ideas into a basic timeline for us to start development of our game. The most important part of our game was going to be the multiplayer. And since I'd never made a game with multiplayer before, I decided I needed to do some research. So after a few hours of boring documentation, I decided the best option for us was to use the Photon network. It was super easy to understand and implement straight into our game. I'd definitely recommend it for anyone new to multiplayer services. To get things up and running, I decided to rip the characters straight out of I'll Be Lost. I decided to create my own character controller so that we could have more customizability over our game, and then I ended up using Cinemachine for the third-person camera. Then I ended up implementing the fireballs over the Photon network, which was a bit of a hassle to set up just because I hadn't had any multiplayer experience prior. But once I got it working, it was super cool, and Alex and I were able to jump around in the scene shooting fireballs at each other for hours on end. We decided that we wanted to test our network capabilities, so we launched 20 clients and all joined the same lobby and then started jumping around together in the Unity scene. The main focus of our game development is modularity, so we want to make sure that everything we do to save on time, we do with a modular approach. An example of this is the terrain that Alex was working on. He was able to create a system where he can shape and mold the shapes of the islands within the Unity editor, and then procedurally generate the textures and objects on top of them. And this is just a super early version of our procedural island generation system. At this point, I'd gotten the first enemy type into our game, the robot chicken. And to make sure that I was creating it with a modular approach, I implemented a procedural animation system using IKs on the chicken's legs. Quick shout out to Codier's channel, who has a great video which helped me get these legs working. I'd recommend watching his videos if you haven't already. At this point, I'd gotten a basic inventory system together where we could start killing some of the enemies in our scene, which would then drop items for us to pick up. These items would then increase our stats so that our character could become more powerful. Things were slowly coming together to look like a proper roguelike. But just like any game development, I was encountering my fair share of bugs like camera orientations and flying chickens. With a few more weeks of work gone by, we'd made a bunch of progress. We'd put together our first basic level of small little islands that we could run around. We added some more items that had a bit more impact in our game. We gave the chickens the ability to shoot fireballs so that they weren't being ruthlessly massacred anymore. And then I'd also spent some time putting some debug capabilities into our game, which I feel like is super important early in the game development cycle. What it essentially allowed us to do is add items to our characters with the click of a button so that we can test different combinations of playstyles and a bunch of other things. We're also able to spawn enemies, stop enemy spawning, change levels, increase speed, all that sort of stuff that helps us figure out how we want our game to be played. So if you haven't already, I'd definitely recommend adding some debug capabilities to your own game just to make the game design and level creation process of your games that much easier. Trust me, it's a time saver. Because I didn't want to get stuck into making one area of our game perfect this early in development, I decided to spend an afternoon putting together a procedural system for our level design. Even though this system isn't currently implemented in our game and all of our levels are handcrafted, this was a great way to get us thinking about different design options and different directions we can take the level generation of our game. We spent another few weeks experimenting with a bunch of different ideas. We're sort of working with different level designs, trying to figure out the elevation platforming of our game. I decided to give the chicken 2 more legs, which I don't really think works that well, but it's sort of fun to test different things. At this point, the game was starting to mold into something we actually wanted to play and was looking a lot better than what we'd started with a few weeks prior. We decided to redesign the level once again. Alex had a bunch of new assets that he'd just grabbed from different games he'd worked on, and we threw them into the scene untextured just to get a little bit of a feel for the theming of our game. I'd also implemented the crystal system where you needed to find 3 crystals that were procedurally generated across the map, and once you grabbed them, you could jump into the portal to get teleported to the next level. And with that done, the game was in a state where we invited a bunch of our mates to jump online and play the game with us. So it was looking pretty fun. We could still cheat by adding a few more items through the debug menu and then jumping super high or adding a bunch of damage, grabbing some extra health, all that sort of stuff. But it was really looking like a good game at this point. Thanks for making it this far into the video. I just wanted to wrap up by saying that we're still trying to come up with a good name for our game, so if you have any ideas, drop them in the comment section down below. We also put out fairly regular updates of the prototyped version of our game onto our itch.io page, so if you're interested in playing it for yourself, you can check that one out. Link for that will be in the description down below. And finally, if you wanted to be part of the creative process while we develop our game, feel free to jump into the Discord where you can give us some suggestions and ideas of what you'd like to see inside the game. Also, it's just a great place to hang out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.